Hello there, how are you doing? I have a Skyrim build for you, a perfect, pretty much, battle mage with full battle functionality of a sword and shield warrior and full mage functionality of insanely well-balanced anniversary edition spells. The Sword of Julianos is another entry in our collab with me and PC Outcast. His idea for a Julianos themed build is linked in the description, I hope. And remember to give him a like and subscribe and say hi from me, cause I like him. Now, while we are at it, I make Skyrim builds quite frequently. Most of them are completely awesome, lightly modded or even vanilla sometimes. And if you would like to see more of that, do not hesitate to subscribe and like. Consider supporting me via Subscribestar or the super thanks thingy in the lower right corner. Anyway, on with the build. The Sword of Julianos is a well-traveled stoic philosopher and a master of swordplay. He is the kind of a guy who never loses his cool because he's seen and done too much. He now seeks the perfect balance between the arcane and the mundane, between mystical and physical powers, and this approach to life makes him a formidable foe and a very flexible warrior. He likes to enroll as a guide and a guardian for caravans and traveling scholars to see even more and obtain even more wisdom, which is what has led him to Skyrim, I think. I even tried to show it in his gear. He wears a traditional extravagant Danameri robe with Nordic jewelry, carrying a Redguard curved sword and a shield designed with an Akaviri influence. He is eclectic in fashion sense and combat style and probably likes using fancy words like the word eclectic. In terms of pure gameplay, this is a very powerful battle mage that, despite being one of the best destruction mages I've ever played, is also one of the best sword and shield fighters. He uses his close combat stance with a shield raised against other mages, at least with the build near completion. Shield charging mages and that extra elemental protection is going to be your best bet against them. Most of his powers come from Anniversary Edition content, especially that insane spell pack called Arcane Accessories that just drops dozens of OP spells in a chest in Hopsfall Cave. It is executed in a manner of a 2012 mod, but what can you do? It's basically vanilla content now. So these spells are frequently used, especially the Unbounded line of spells. Unbounded, Freezing, Flames and Storms. All of them are rather expensive, expert level concentration spells, so not that easy to use early on, but in your 30s you should be able to start using them. Unbounded Freezing and Unbounded Storms both grant you what's essentially an extra elemental cloak on top of your current cloak, except the extra one needs to be kept up like a ward and consumes your magicka continuously. Unbounded Storms also brings forth lightning onto random enemies near you, so with a lightning cloak and Unbounded Storms you will deal enough shock and magicka damage to stop some enemies from spellcasting even before they can drop dead. Even dragons may have difficulties using their breath attacks around you, since they are actually using magicka for those. And we also use the weirdest destruction spells ever, the Elemental Burst or Elemental Blast or Flare, depending on what your destruction skill and magicka allows for at that time. I will talk more of them in the spells section, but essentially they benefit from all the elemental destruction perks. Despite not dealing any frost damage, they get improved by frost perks too. They may not be the best spells in terms of damage per cast, but they are definitely among the most cost-effective spells created for Skyrim, except maybe some obvious cheat mods. Then, to lean into that Master of All Elements vibe, we have our sword enchanted with the fabled Chaos enchantment, which of course also benefits from all the elemental destruction perks. I believe the Skyrim math experts proclaim that all the augmented perks unlocked with one character result in a times 3.37 multiplier on average on Chaos enchantment. We will improve it further by adding the Vokrii perk of Thunderstruck, bringing another times 1.5 to that equation on power attacks. In our case, with the build complete, we will get a 50% chance on hit to deal 222 points of damage from each element separately, so at the very best, if all three elements trigger, it's 666 elemental damage. Or 1000 on a power attack. It's all just working out. Obviously, we want Wintersun to worship the god of wisdom, Julianos. All our spells will cost less and be stronger with this guy as our lord and savior. Some Vokrii perks, especially Destruction and Alteration ones, play an important role in building up our overall spell damage and elemental resistance. Summermyst enchantments are here mainly for the Amplified Destruction effect, duh, and classic classes are used for the Pilgrim class, believe it or not. It will grant us the Mysticism buff, partly offsetting the Magicka regeneration penalty of the Atronach Stone, but also a very small but perfect for roleplay buff to all 3 attributes for the skill books read during the playthrough. It's 5 points per 10 skill books you open, so not much, but it's still nice to have and suits the concept quite well. Usable Elder Scrolls will allow you to wear the Elder Scrolls on your back. We want the Downguard specific scrolls, the Magicka one especially, because it improves your Magicka regeneration by 100%. So now we more than offset the Atronach penalty. We have some other ways of doing it, so it's nothing too important. Then we also have a red linen cloak from Capes and Cloaks, just for the looks of it. Everything else is anniversary vanilla. Good news for all of you who prefer to stay vanilla. I strongly suspect that this build can be retrofitted into vanilla very easily. Basically, you may need some elemental resistance on your gear, which I get via Vokrii perks, and for higher difficulties you will need to perk alchemy so that you can craft OP fortified destruction potions to improve the damage output of your spells, which I do with Summermyst enchantments and Vokrii perks here. The resulting build may be a tiny bit weaker than this, but should still rule and rock, at least on Master, I'm quite sure. So the least surprising standing stone of the Atronach was activated ASAP, especially that we have so many ways of offsetting its Magicka regeneration debuff. It will eventually combine with the Atronach alteration perk to bring overall spell absorption chance to 80%. It also grants an extra 50 points of Magicka to stack with the other 50 from the High Elf race and the easily obtainable 25 from the Blessing of Julianos. Later on we will stack that with the Alter Self perk, which means we don't really need that much investment in Magicka on level ups. The best attribute spread for legendary difficulty with my mods is probably 1 point of Magicka per 2 of health per 1 of stamina. A perfectly even spread could also be considered, especially if you are trying to repurpose this video for a vanilla playthrough, because in vanilla you'll get less Magicka regeneration and slightly less Magicka value than what we have here. Now for the skills, we perk one-handed block, alteration, destruction, and possibly take steel smithing for the sake of legendary difficulty, and of course we need some enchanting at least. In one-handed we want the sword perks with only 1 rank of overpowering assault and the victory rush at the top. Victory rush restoring your stamina on weapon kills is quite a big deal for the build, because we don't have items or abilities increasing stamina and stamina regeneration, which means in close combat we need to take breaks from power attacking. For the same reasons, it's vital that you grab the Disciplined Fighter perk, reducing the stamina cost of power attacks. Luckily our weapon is not that heavy, so overall we are going to be quite effective with power attacks, and of course you can always cook yourself some veggie soup or a venison stew for extra stamina regeneration. In block we need the Power Bash to stagger enemies and interrupt their power attacks, and we need all the perks in the middle up to and including Shield Charge with the Quick Reflexes and Elemental Protection. Elemental Protection is another big one for this build. You want your items to focus around increasing your damage, so perks are responsible for most of your defense. And Shield Charge is of course bonkers as usual. To preserve some stamina, do not use the Shield Charge to charge across large distances. The best use of it is to briefly charge down as many enemies as you can after the Quick Reflexes slow time effect is triggered. Late game we will pair Elemental Protection with the Elemental Shield perk in Destruction, which grants you 50% resistance to the element of your currently active Cloak spell. This means basically you can always be maxed out on resistance to one element and resist half of the incoming damage from the 2 orders as long as your shield is raised. The real fun with the build is in the destruction perks and how oddly they interact with your spells in the enchantment on your sword. You need all the augmented perks for all 3 elements because, as mentioned, the elemental flare and its stronger counterparts get a damage increase from all of them, and so does the chaos enchantment. I also took the special effect perks for frost spells. It's not even that I used Frost the most, it was just stupidly satisfying with the Elemental Burst spell. With Winter's Grasp, you get a spell that deals pure magic damage, then some shock damage, then it leaves the fire afterburn effect and freezes them solid when they are low on health, essentially removing them from combat a tad sooner. It's just quite cool. It's quite cool. Pathos Disjunction will make your enemies weaker to the element of your currently active Cloak spell. With Elemental Shield, it means that against fire-breathing dragons, for example, it's best to cast the Flame Cloak and raise your shield. You will take away some of their fire resistance and get very resistant to their breath attacks. You may also combine Flame Cloak with Unbounded Storms to keep dealing damage to them as they fly by. Alteration is fun too, as always in Vokrii. We want Mage Armor 3 out of 3, maybe it's worth reminding you that a shield doesn't cancel this perk's effects, so you can have the increased armor rating from Flesh spell and the armor from a shield properly improved at an armor workbench. Sorcerer's Robes add an extra 25% damage to all our damage dealing spells and extra duration to our armor spells. This is extra fun for a battle mage like this one, because we also take both ranks of the battle mage perk. Our spells will deal up to 30% more damage against a target we've just hit with a weapon, so that's 50% extra damage from just doing what we like to do anyways, slashing people while wearing a fancy robe. Alter Self was used to increase magicka, and stability is most useful after you can auto-cast the Dragon Hide master level spell. Dragon Hide is the best flesh spell, but its duration is shorter than that of the other armor spells. But with stability and Sorcerer's Robes, it should hardly be a problem. In enchanting, we take the item type perks, so weapon, armor and regalia enchanter, and on the leftmost side we go for the Thunderstruck perk that will make our OP sword 50% more OP when we power attack. The prerequisite perks are of questionable utility, but I think it's worth it anyway, considering how stupidly powerful Chaos effect already is. Yes, for min-maxing reasons, you could also consider using a Stalrim sword instead of a scimitar. Somehow I don't think it's necessary. That's that for the skills. Just remember about the steel smithing for higher difficulties and hone your sword properly, preferably with some blacksmith's elixir and 2, say, items of peerless smithing. Consider using some alchemy at least from time to time despite the lack of perks. Even a meager 20% increase to your spell damage can make a difference. The gear is really easy for this build near completion. It's that Chaos Scimitar, an Akaviri shield with magic resistance, and everything else is either Fortify one-handed or Amplify Distraction. On lower difficulty levels or before the build is almost complete, you won't need that many damage improving effects, so consider some elemental resistance. The list of the main spells is also quite simple, although it may not look like it at first. Basically, nearly all of your main spells are in the same chest in Hobbs Fall Cave. It's not even the boss chest. Were you drunk, Todd? The cloak spells, well, you will need to buy those, as well as some healing spells. Despite the lack of restoration perks, a decent heal is required. Sometimes your resistances are mostly conditional and your spell absorption won't reach 100%. Now it's time to talk about the Elemental Flare and its late game variants, like Elemental Blast. As mentioned, they benefit from all the augmented perks. You can potentially get a special effect from the Frost branch, so they can freeze low health enemies solid despite not dealing any frost damage. They say they deal fire damage, but they don't. It's actually raw magic damage. But the afterburn effect still triggers. In vanilla, not in Vokrii, however, but it's still weird and interesting. They will cause panic if both Intense Flames and Aspect of Terror perks are taken, and the afterburn will deal a little bit more damage then. On top of all that, Elemental Burst is actually cheaper to cast than Fireball, despite being on the same level, Adept, I believe, level of complexity. It's bizarre. Were you freaking drunk, Todd? Of course, there are also the unbounded spells, with the unbounded storms being the most useful, especially against mages and dragons. Against fighters like a common bandit, a frost cloak and unbounded freezing will slow down their attacks, apply weakness to frost, and freeze the enemies both at random from the unbounded spell and when they are low on health from the Winter's Grasp perk. Against mixed groups like the Forsworn, mixing and matching cloaks and unbounded spells is a good idea too. You can use unbounded storms before a dragon is grounded, for example, to keep damaging it at a greater distance, and then while it lands near you, you can switch to the freeze spell. But honestly, every combo of unbounded and a cloak spell will probably work because these spells are just insane. So as promised, we get a battle mage that is very good at both battle and mage, capable of focusing on each of these aspects separately, but also mixing and matching them at your leisure. I just can't believe this is legendary difficulty and that all these spells are now vanilla. Todd, like really, I mean, huh? Anyway, this video is done now. Like, share and subscribe, be nice to your parents, don't swear too much, and have a lot of fun. We will see each other again. Bye!